Josette is going to start. She recently joined CTM as Chief Strategy Officer and Director of Research and Industry Relations, and has had a great career at the convergence of film, entertainment, telecom, and technology companies, so she brings all of those perspectives. Andrea is CTM's Assistant Director of Research and is an expert in consumer mobile behavior, and we've heard a lot about that today. She directs the digital home study that she's going to give you a high-level summary of. And then Elizabeth Fife is Associate Director of Industry Relations, and she runs the Global Mobile Study, which has been going on for some time at CTM. I just want to let everyone know that there's a white paper that's been created by CTM on the study that we will be emailing to all of the registrants tomorrow, so you'll have it. And for now, let me just please welcome Josette, Elizabeth, and Andrea to the stage.
Thank you very much, Carla. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Ogilvy and all of you for the opportunity of speaking at this prestigious conference. So this panel is going to be very different from the ones that took place this morning, because we're a research institute. As Carla explained, we are the Institute for Communication Technology Management at USC. So we work in an academic environment, but we are definitely industry-facing. In fact, some of our sponsors are in this room today. So let me first talk about a subject that is very dear to our slate of projects. It's the future of media. Now, you've heard this whole morning a lot of comments about the future of media from some of the leading executives in this industry. But I hope this is going to be a slightly different take on it, although some of it will be corroborated by what you heard this morning. So when we started this research project at USC, we wanted to give a 360-degree look at a phenomenon that is occurring, that again has been discussed a lot this morning, having to do with displacement. Displacement essentially occurring on two major fronts. On viewing, users more and more leaving their viewing habits of watching TV on TV screens hooked up to set-top boxes in favor of a plethora of digital media devices, and also a displacement of services, away from the bouquet of traditional cable, satellite, and IPTV networks, and more in favor of OTT video services. So, having said that, the new digital media platforms have yet to generate significant revenues for the entertainment industry and for the industries that support the delivery and the packaging of that content. However, what is really significant is the growth of these services. So in time, we feel that this displacement will have a profound influence on the entertainment industry, but also on the service provider industry, the MPTVs, as well as on the technology companies that service these industries. So the questions that we are looking at in our research program are what types of new business models are going to continue to fuel this industry? Are there going to be new business models that are not invented today that could somehow surface and take on like wildfire? Also, very importantly, again, I've alluded to the growth of these services. So what are the economic consequences of that growth on the industries that we talked about? And how are the VPDs going to react to the new services? What is their positioning going to be? And what are the technological breakthroughs that might actually precipitate the future of media? How we look at this is by a combination of primary research as well as secondary research. We have a panel comprising 5,500 North American consumers that we poll every year about all aspects of the digital life, as you're about to hear from my colleague Andrea. And this year, we posed a number of questions having to do with the future of media and evolving media consumption. We are also carrying out a number of C-level executive interviews, not just from the film and entertainment sector, but also from telecom and technology. From these learnings, we are gathering scenarios which could stem from watershed events affecting the industry. And we are going to be providing economic analyses of these scenarios. What I mean by that is what happens, for instance, is if the famous unbundling actually takes place. What if, Comcast decides to offer a la carte video services? What would be the implication of something like that on the industry? Well, the implication might actually be dire, as we heard this morning. Some channels may no longer be carried. If those channels are not carried, then a whole slew of programming is no longer being monetized and may actually fall by the wayside. So it's this cascade of events that we plan on analyzing through our scenario planning. Okay. 5 things you may not know about the future of media. Or you may know, in certain cases. The panel this morning, comprising a brochette of executives from AOL and CNN and Fox, actually provided a phenomenal preview for what I'm about to discuss. So I have actually gathered a couple of slides that actually are excerpts from our primary research, which I would like to share with you in nugget form this afternoon, in the 5 New York minutes I have left. So, not surprisingly, perhaps, our survey confirmed that a significant percentage of TV viewing, involves second screen use. What is interesting is that the laptop is still the prevalent platform for this type of behavior. But tablets actually shows the largest increase in second screen behavior between last year and this year. So that is an area that certainly deserves to be watched very closely. Regardless of home type, to piggyback on this idea, people who use tablets actually view more content overall, especially with those tablets that are equipped with Android operating systems. But even in homes that are low-tech, if they acquire a tablet, you might predict with accuracy that their viewing behavior will actually increase in total number of hours. Now, the consumers that displace their viewing tend to fall in 3 distinct categories, as we have analyzed from our survey. The first category is the frequent networker, who tends to be mostly female, pretty young, mostly Caucasian. The frequent OTT user, okay, perhaps not surprisingly, although wait for the following slides, might tell a different story. That frequent OTT user is predominantly male and also fairly young. The likely canceller, which is also predominantly male, very young by comparison to the others, since 70% of that demographic falls under the age of 44. So those are the 3 types that we have identified as most likely to displace their viewing. But like cancelers and OTT users, binge view. You've heard a lot about binge viewing this morning. Now, that is the saving grace for film entertainment companies, because it's a phenomenon that replaces, watching traditional media in a way, but in terms of the total number of hours spent watching TV, if you binge, you watch a lot of TV, okay? So that's a very important element to take into consideration. Now, you might have surmised that OTT users, because they watch Hulu, Netflix, Crackle, etc., are expected to displace from bouquets of channels offered by their satellite cable operator or IPTV operator. Well, actually, not that much, okay? You'll see. In fact, frequent OTT users watch more channels, as it turns out, more traditional TV channels, than the ones that are not so frequent OTT users or non-OTT users at all. So this is one of our counterintuitive findings. Now, those 5 things will no longer shock you that I was about to tell you about the future of media, because you've heard some of them this morning on the panel. But it's really reassuring and interesting to have our views corroborated. Because at USC, we're sort of a neutral place, all right? We don't take the point of view of the entertainment, the telecom, or technology industries. We just analyze what we see. Perhaps what you have not heard from our film and entertainment colleagues is that the cost of content is becoming more and more of a problem, in the sense that it keeps rising. Okay, and that is at a time when the media economics might least support it. In fact, established OTTs like Netflix jump in the bandwagon and produce shows like House of Cards, okay? That's both great and not so great, perhaps, in the long term for the film and entertainment sector. Now, you've also heard this, and frankly, when I heard it for the first time, coming from the film and entertainment industry myself, I was really shocked. But in some of the executive interviews that we have conducted to date with service operators that offer traditional video services, as well as with entertainment companies, we have heard that some of the operators want to retrench to the broadband access business, that content is not profitable. Now, we knew that the margins on content were extremely small for those companies, but to finally hear for the first time in 2013 that it may not be profitable, that it's really a sector that is not a growth sector for those companies, and to have their claims that essentially they want to retrench to being pipes, to me was a shocker. Interesting point. After all, you could just offer broadband access, and meter it, and make a lot of money on that unremunerated traffic. Now, the relationship between MVPDs and OTTs is also starting to change. There is more and more talk of alliances between the likes of Hulu and the Netflix, with cable, satellite, IPTV operators. It's the spirit of, if you cannot win them, join them. So the future promises to be very interesting. Very, very interesting. It is certainly not going to be black and white. It is going to be in shades of gray. And it is not going to be a revolution. It is going to be an evolution. However, there might be wild cards. And those wild cards are what we are going to be focusing on in our Future of Media research program. Thank you very much.
In the following, I would like to talk with you about another significant research program of CTM, which is called Digital Home. Before we started this program, we saw a trend that the use of media and technology, both inside and outside of the home, is becoming a focus of consumers' attention and spending, and as well as a key area of innovation and investments from companies that range from telecommunications to digital content and entertainment. So 6 years ago, we designed the Digital Home Research Program with the goal to provide insights into the connected multi-screen digital home. We work a little bit differently in this project than the usual research model. This study is carried out jointly in a cooperation between CTM and our 15 corporate sponsors, some of which are here. We use this 6 years of consumer data to track consumer behavior in digital environments and to identify what are the key drivers and what are the mitigators of adopting this connected lifestyle that we keep hearing about more and more lately. I would like to talk a little bit about this, the way we do this research, because I think it's one of the big values of this research program. When we talk with our sponsors and we ask from them what is the value that they get out of this program, they say that they like to be a part of a rigorous, academically driven program. They have the opportunity to put proprietary questions in the survey, and we worked together very closely to design the survey itself. And also, when we get together with this group in our workshops, one of the key benefits is that these companies sit down and they discuss how different data points translate into their environments that represent different elements of the ecosystem. And just briefly, let me show you that who are the companies we're working on this year. We're sponsored by our host, Ogilvy. We work with tech giants like Qualcomm, Cisco, Alcatel, and Ericsson. On the content side, Warner Brothers, Fox, Rovi, as well as we work together with PricewaterhouseCoopers, TDS, Eris, CBC, and so on. So in the following, I would like to show a couple of findings that we see that are a little bit different that you might have seen before. So we start the study with putting together an inventory of devices people have in the home. And what we see is that devices don't come to the home separately. They co-occur together. So what it means is if, for example, if you have a game console, you're more likely to have a handheld gaming device as well. Or if you have an Apple computing device, you're more likely to have an iPad, an iPod, or other Apple devices. So the configuration of the devices that co-occur in the home define 8 distinct device ecosystems, which are streaming devices like Roku, Apple TV, Google TV, advanced entertainment devices like smart TVs, Blu-ray, HD TVs, gaming devices, Apple devices, Android devices, functional devices in the home like printers, or desktops, and basic entertainment, which is still very dominant in the majority of the US population, and mobile computing. So what we do with this with analysis is that we use it for segmenting the US population. And we identified 5 key segments in the US population according to how much they use those different device ecosystems, and if they over or under index in terms of gaming or Apple devices and so on. So I would like to point out 2 big groups. There are 2 large segments. We call them the minimal and the basic homes. They are the households who have fewer number of devices in their homes, and in general, they are slower to adopt new technology. And the other 3 groups that actually comprise 43% of the whole US population, they are the ones that have more devices in the home, and they are quicker to adopt all kinds of new technologies and behaviors. They are Android households who over-index in owning all kinds of products running an Android operating system, Apple households, and the gaming households. As Josette just mentioned, we very rarely have people's full attention anymore when they watch TV. Actually, 41% of the time, when people watch TV, they say they use a second screen. And what Josette mentioned before, it's laptop that people prefer when they use a device as a second screen, which might be because of people's adoption level of laptops is higher. But if you look at those people who actually own the whole list of those 8 devices, we see that they still prefer the laptop. So that's a little bit of controversy to what Josette said, but I would like to point out in the following a little bit of a comparison between the laptop and tablet use that we find very interesting. So in the digital home study, we also ask our respondents what type of activities they do on different type of devices. And in the following, I would like to show you comparing 3 mobile devices, laptops, tablets, and smartphones. When it comes to doing entertainment type of activities like playing games, viewing short-form video, watching TV shows, movies, or personal media or sports, we see that tablets and laptops almost equally used for entertainment purposes, and there's a big difference between those two devices and smartphones, which are mostly used for gaming and personal media. And the reason could be that when we ask people what is the experience that they have when they view a specific type of entertainment content, like a TV show or a movie, on a laptop versus a tablet, when it comes to quality or reliability or ease of use, we see that the overall perceived quality of experience is pretty much the same for those two devices. I have one more last slide that I would like to share with you. We briefly look at how people discover content. And when you see in that table how people know about which movies, TV shows, or sports on TV they want to use, it's still TV ads that's the most common source of information. Getting recommendations from family and friends is catching up, and also when you look at those three household types that are the most technologically advanced, you see that the influence of getting information from social networks is much more significant than for the other segments. So I would like to hand it over to Elizabeth.
Thank you. I'm going to talk to you today about our other project. This is the Global Mobile Study. And this project looks at how people use and think about their mobile phones. We've done this over the past 8 years and in a total of 16 different countries. The current members are listed right here for you. So we're able to compare longitudinally through time and across the world through space. And the idea is to see how the mobile phone, this object that people consider kind of an extension cord to their personalized reality, is used. As Rocco Fabiano mentioned earlier in the presentation before lunch, managing the environment is what we see as one of the primary values of having a mobile phone. And we ask about perceptions. So that idea about the digital sixth sense resonates with the survey data as we've found it so far. We know that the mobile phone is special and that it's valued quite differently than any other of the devices for media consumption. So the survey basically tries to reveal what that means, what that entails. So the underlying overall research question is understanding user value as the key to developing revenue models that can benefit all the players in the mobile ecosystem. So this study, it provides industry insight, but it's also used for academic research. So there's lots of papers that have been published in academic journals that use this data. Just so you know how this study works, we manage the consortium at USC and the final survey. Our current support comes from our board of our research center, and specifically our members this time are Alcatel, Cisco, Ericsson, and Rovi here. Just a few examples of who uses this data besides academic purposes in our sponsors. Well, Cisco uses it as qualitative info to support their visual networking index project, their VNI, which maps data flows and growth on a global basis. The FCC uses it for their internal analysis. And finally, the Advertising Research Foundation, ARF, they're incorporating this study into their major mobile initiative that Ogilvy is supporting that will map out the current state of knowledge in this field. So there's diverse uses of this data for many different groups. So today I'm just going to show you a couple results from this year's US study. We collect data from lots of other countries, but today we'll just focus on one market. So in terms of, well, we have 5 things here too, keeping with the theme. We're looking at the increased frequency of use. Not a big surprise that frequency of use is increasing across all the different kinds of activities. Secondly, the value of the phone, personalization, and the way that we have found that personalized use is defined is somewhat different. It's usefulness, efficacy, and useful also means simple, fast, and sort of aesthetically compelling. So it's more than just utility. It's kind of a beautiful utility. It has to be a way to do something better than the substitution that's around. Thirdly, the intenseness of feeling, so people's attachment to their mobile phone, we see that increasing actually through time. However, despite increased usage, we also see that people feel that they underuse their phone, they underuse their data plans. And there's several possible reasons for this. And one reason that the data shows is perhaps we've talked a lot today about finding the content, the discovery process for music, for television, how difficult it is. Same in the mobile world. So this is a bottleneck. It's kind of hit or miss for people to find the content that, or the apps that actually fit this value that was just described of personalization. So that's one of the challenges. And then finally, it's not one of our 5 things, we'll look at another emerging market customer. In this case, it's Myanmar, better known as Burma, frontier market that's newly opened after 50 years of isolation. So there's a lot of interest in this market for possible future growth. So let's look at the data. Here we see how frequently people use their mobile phone for these categories of services. And this is a 2-year comparison over the last 2 years. And the categories, big categories, we look at communication, browsing, search, information, entertainment, and commerce. And as we always find, communications is the most frequently used service. The phone is still used for communication, and that's the blue ribbon across the top there. And the frequency of that in the last 2 years increased by about 10%, although you can't quite see it. The really interesting change, however, is at the bottom. It's m-commerce, it's the green strip. And this has always been the lowest use category, least used type of service. And suddenly, after years of sort of expectations, we saw a big change in the past year in terms of the use. And part of this is probably because, well, there's just more opportunities and more things you can do that haven't been available in the past. And also people are a bit more aware of what they're doing. So just in terms of a survey response quality, we see the result this year. Entertainment, the orange line, again, it's used less, but it grew more this year. So those 2 categories show where growth is beginning. We're beginning to see it. The overall picture, though, the majority of mobile data is still, it's pretty much consumed in the traditional ways that we're used to, texting, browsing, social media, and that sort of thing. Okay. Here we see, we asked about motivations, things that drive people to use services. And mobile utility, again, this is the quality that stands out here. You can see saving time on the left, usefulness on your right. This chart is just kind of an interesting data visualization, I think, because it shows pretty much complete agreement in 2 different time periods, only the more recent time period you see a greater degree of agreeableness. So when you talk about personalization, these are the attributes. This is at least part of what makes personalization a value for the user, the consumer. So we see increased use, we see increased attachment to the mobile phone, But nonetheless, people feel that they aren't making full use of their plans. So there's a discrepancy here. And here we can see in this pie chart the perception of underuse. And the important part is the dark blue there. Nearly 60% of people think that they underuse their plans. And this is regardless of age or the platform that's being used. A good number of people aren't really sure. They don't really know. They don't keep track of things like that. A bit of the reason could be that some of the high frequency use activities, they just tend to be light data activities. So that weather, people look at the weather every single day. That's always one of the higher use services that we find in the survey, but browsing too. Anyway, so this pie chart, the younger users are in the middle, and it gets older as you go out, just to orient yourselves. So the older you are, actually, the more you feel that you underuse your data plan, which that probably makes some sense. One possible reason for this feeling of underuse, this slide shows app discovery, and the important part is what's in the brackets there. The important source for learning about apps, it's actually the app stores and through friends. So app search is pretty limited. People aren't very motivated to search, and this again reflects the value that we saw in the first slide. People want it fast, efficient, easy, so they're not going to go out of their way and try. So app stores, the top 10, that's good enough. So we don't see people wanting to really put a lot of time into this activity. But what this suggests is that just a greater refinement of this discovery process could encourage wider and deeper use. And so this is kind of an important issue for anyone who's trying to identify customer bases or develop a segment. So this we consider one of the bottlenecks. And Apple and Android, they're all addressing this, but it's difficult. Okay, so now moving from the mobile user in the mature market, we'll turn to another part of the world that you might not know too much about. This is Myanmar. And you probably don't know too much about it because hardly anyone has a mobile phone there. Mobile penetration is about 2%, and that's less than 1 million out of a population of over 60 million. Internet penetration is almost non-existent. So on the one hand, if you're looking for a growth market, this is pretty good. So we're in the middle of a mobile use survey. It's more of an aspiration survey. To my knowledge, there are no other surveys of mobile user behavior going on in this market. But it's quite an interesting one. We're doing a study with the support of the Pacific Telecommunications Council, the PTC. It will be ready in January if you are interested in the telecom environment and how it will develop in this future important Southeast Asian market. So before I conclude and we take some questions, I'll just show you one result from this survey that's kind of underway. We asked the same questions in the US survey about motivation to use a mobile phone. And there are, in fact, people who have smartphones. So you can get them from China. There are lots of imitation phones. And the results, well, they're pretty similar to those of all of the other markets. Usefulness, utility is valued. The highest motivation to use a phone, though, is urgent situations. So that's different than the US. That probably just reflects, uncertainty of different aspects of life in this country. The mobile device, not shown in the slide, it's also used for news, for community information, local news, national news. And the reason for this is because there is no legacy of print media. The last 50 years, there's been censorship, and so they've just jumped directly to digital media. So it's an interesting example of leapfrogging, actually, because, well, in this case, there's no substitute, there's nothing else available. So anyway, this seems like a kind of useful market to look at because it's just greenfield. It's starting fresh, and you can see what happens as things develop over in the coming years. So with that, I will conclude, and I think we'll open it to any questions you have for Josette, Andrea, or myself about these 3 studies. Thank you. Any questions? In the back, there's one.
I think this is for Josette. The question is, any perspective on how best-in-class advertisers are connecting the different screens to one another in the consumer experience?
You touched on a very hot button there. We actually haven't reached the point where we are analyzing, the impact of advertising across platforms. However, the data that we have gathered to date from our C-level executive interviews would tend to actually indicate that the situation is a virtual mess at this point in time, and that something needs to happen. And it's not so much a technology issue as it is an industry issue. Industry getting together and making a concerted effort to make this happen. Now, dynamic ad insertion across devices for the same show is obviously a huge deal, and it's starting to get traction. But unfortunately, it's a bit early in our project stage to answer that question, so stay tuned.
Hi, this is Bo Outwater from Ericsson. Elizabeth, I have a question on the Myanmar study. I assume that the current 1% of users is really kind of the elite class.
Yes, it's very expensive to have access.
So over time, as this, between now and 2017, when you forecast 50% penetration, you'll actually see the entire, it'll really move down through all the economic classes. Do you plan to quantify that? In particular, how it moves through the economic classes, and what do you expect to see based on what you've seen in other countries?
Well, this is a case that's actually hard to compare to any other place. There isn't really a comparable. Obviously, economic growth has to exist to support network use in some sense, and the GDP is very, very low for 95% of the population, so that creates a business model problem. It's the usual thing of great need but low ability to pay. So that requires creative solutions in terms of the kind of network that would be put in. It has to be very efficient and cost effective, and has to consider the type of user, which is different from a user in an industrialized country. But pretty much it seems like economic growth has to come first, and probably the first users will be the ones who can pay. It'll be corporate users coming in and setting up companies, the multinational companies that require broadband to do business, and the urban centers. And then it will have to diffuse out to the rural users. Oh, there's one.
5 to 10 years, do you actually look at all 3 of your studies effectively blurring? I think it's going to be increasingly hard to segment it. Do you see current overlapping issues now, and how far in the future do you see before effectively there isn't going to be that distinction?
We
One
actually,
giant study, yes.
yeah, we've already been seeing a significant overlapping between the US smartphone and the digital home study. We started in the US smartphone study to look at other mobile devices. And then, we faced this problem, but I think the future of media as entertainment is getting more and more consumed on these devices. These 3 studies actually are going to merge into each other in the near future, probably within 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. As you saw, the tablet, for instance, by the way, we were not really contradicting ourselves with the tablet use. the point that I wanted to make in my slide deck was that tablets have jumped exponentially over the past year in terms of media viewing. So I mean, it's this kind of thing that, since we use the same annual survey for viewer displacement analysis for future media as we do with digital home, the data forms a whole that we can apply to the various studies. The other thing about use of tablets, might as well complete my thoughts on that. It's for viewing, but it's also to access companion devices. I'm sorry, not companion devices, companion content to what is being viewed on the primary screen. Although we are now finding from our executive interviews that tends to be not as useful as all that. So the executives that have pioneered companion device use of tablet for main shows are finding that it's actually more distracting than it is worth. Interesting data point. Very much.
I think it's very interesting that what you heard from executives this morning is borne out by quantitative research that's done by an academic institution. And we're very proud as Ogilvy to be the only agency that's involved in CTM, and we have been for several years now, because we really want to be at the forefront of all of these global movements. Now, next, we're going to come back to what I talked about this morning, the sort of revolution in wearable computing, and what is known as the quantified self movement, which is incorporating technology and data acquisition into aspects of a person's daily life in terms of inputs and states and performance, and it's really gaining a head of steam among consumers. So I'm really thrilled that we are bringing together a few different leaders today to talk about this. Dilip Schwartz is the president of Withings, a very forward-thinking digital personal info company. Melissa Parrish is a principal analyst at Forrester in their wearables and mobile practices. And Todd Cullen, who's Ogilvy's chief data officer, and who happens to have a personal interest in as a marathon runner and other pursuits in being a wearables expert. And we're going to be hearing first from Brandon Berger. He's going to start off with some demos of some life logging technologies. He'll explain what that is too. But let's welcome Brandon to the stage.
Thanks, Colin. There isn't a single consumer electronics store, there isn't a single day that we don't see something on Kickstarter that's new and emerging about wearables, about the quantified self. And in fact, I've been doing this for a long time. I remember when Fitbit first came out, I tracked everything. And so I figure, to start this off, might as well just have a weigh-in, right? I'm wearing my party socks. Don't worry, you gotta have party socks when you do these things. The water. The water is impacting.
Take your jacket off. Come on, all the tricks.
Okay, so I'll take the jacket off. Whew, get a little naughty there. So now this is going to tell me my weight. It's going to feed it to my device. It's also going to tell me my BMI. It's also going to tell me my body fat percentage and my pulse. And all of that will come to my device. And clearly, in the past 4 hours, I've gained 5 pounds. But maybe that's all the gear I'm carrying. It is the jacket. And so it says I weigh 180.5. Earlier this morning, I weighed 175.7. We'll see how that goes. When I typically do a panel or presentation or get on stage, I get warm. I get a little heated up. I think my blood pressure goes up. So I thought I might as well see what my blood pressure was when I got here earlier today and what it looks like now to get a better idea. So I'm not going to rule. So this is another device that's on the market from our friends at Withings that tracks your blood pressure. It syncs up here to my device, to an app, and now we'll see. Now I want you guys to know that my blood pressure earlier today, is it okay if I tell you this stuff? Yeah, it's okay, right? It's not like nobody's judging me, right? But so it was 120/70. That's good, right? Right. Let's see. Let's see how it goes. Okay. You can't see this, so it's not really that exciting for you. But we'll see here. Measurements in process. I probably shouldn't be talking, that may impact it.
It does.
Shh. Oh, wait, did I screw that up? I think I screwed that up. Hold on, sorry. Never do a live demo. Did we learn that today? Or never do a live demo? Oh, wait. Let me do that one more time. I gotta put it here. That would have been helpful. Colin, will you strap this? Will you strap me out here? Yeah, please.
What do you want me to do?
Just strap me up here. Just above my shoulder.
I didn't go to medical school or anything.
I know.
I'm not really
There we go,
signed
that's
off on
perfect.
this.
Okay, good. There we go. All right, let's try it again. Ready? Okay. No, seriously, you guys are making me nervous here. It's almost done. It went up. It's 154/101 right now. So I'm on stage. Well, I'm under a lot of pressure here, so just be gentle, please. Whew. Yeah, it was, right? God, I gained some weight in the past. Jeez. I have another device on my back right now that every time I slouch over, it vibrates. It's really not very fun to sit in these chairs. And you know, it's really amazing. And then I also have this other device here called the Jawbone Up. How many people in the room have a device on them that they're tracking their behaviors? Not that many, huh? Do you know 30% of all people would love to be able to track sleep? Wouldn't that be amazing? You know, being able to just track sleep. People feel that that's the only thing that they really want, that data can really help them understand, is how do I get more sleep? But the problem is when you track sleep, like I do, you realize how badly you sleep. Like you realize that like 6 hours feels pretty normal, and that's definitely not what you're supposed to be doing. But you know what's amazing is as this becomes the norm, as devices, as technology, and we'll pass these around and play with them, and some of our panels will come in and get weighed. So I won't feel as bad. As devices become the norm, and we become much more about the Internet of Things becomes much more a reality, right? We've all talked about the Internet of Things, and it becomes the Internet of social things. And as devices get connected, how do we, as marketers, how do we start thinking about bridging the gap, right? There's so much information. You know, it's my favorite story to talk about is my sleep, right? So I track on my Jawbone. It shows that I get 6 hours. It shows I travel, all this stuff. I would love it if the loyalty program of the hotel I was with was able to ask me for that data, was then able to say, hey, Brandon, you know what? You don't sleep enough. Let me give you a room that's in the corner, that's set at 68 degrees with an eye mask and super comfortable pillows and perfectly designed for the way I need to get a better night's sleep. Wouldn't that be amazing? I would never, ever shift or change hotels if they simply gave me that value. And so the real challenge is, as we start thinking about first the quantified self, as more and more of you, I mean, there's only 4 or 5 of you, and I know Martin does a lot of tracking of his fitness activities. As more of us become involved with the quantified self, as we take that and we start sharing that information with our peers, and it becomes much more social as we start looking at how am I running versus my friends, how am I eating versus my friends, how am I sleeping versus my friends, how am I doing everything, and how everything becomes trackable. The big question becomes then, what's the role of the brand, and how do brands get involved? How do they start engaging in this space? How do they start interacting, and how do they start bridging the gap, moving us from the quantified self to the social quantified self to ultimately the brand engagement layer? And so we've got a great panel today, which I'm very excited about. In fact, one of the companies I met, I got to see at CES this year, and I fell in love with their products, as you've seen, and I'm really excited to have their present here. We've got somebody from Forrester who's going to talk, Melissa's going to talk about the data and the information that's out there around this space. And then we've got our Todd Cullen, who's our Chief Data Officer, talking about kind of how do you connect the data that's in place with brands, and how do we bring that all together to ultimately not just add value, but create loyalty, create advocacy, and drive purchase. So I think with that, I'm going to call up my panelists to come on board, and if you guys can weigh in, and Melissa, if you could do me a favor and just give me your oxygen level, that would be great.
After this lunch, this is not
my
very
oxygen
fair.
level is going to go to your phone, which is really weird.
I know.
Right?
Well, I'll keep that up. I'll have that for a while. Don't worry.
Do I have to post this somewhere?
It does it automatically. Don't worry.
I have it. Don't worry. I'm sharing with a few people. It's just there's my posture reader. So thank you guys very much for coming out here. If you could just please give a little brief introduction about what you do, who you are. I think I've got an echo here. Is there an echo? Who you are, and also, what's your favorite thing to track, or how are you tracking, or what's going on in your life that makes the quantified self important to you as an individual?
Sure. So I'm Melissa Parrish. I'm a principal analyst and research director at Forrester. I lead a team of analysts who are all focused on mobile and emerging technologies specifically for marketers, so what marketers can do with that. Before I came to Forrester, I was the director of social and some emerging technology at Time Inc., so I've sort of seen it from a bunch of different angles. I think my favorite thing to do yes, fabulous. I think my favorite thing to track is actually steps. And there's a really good reason for that. It's only one piece of the puzzle, of course, but I am a data geek, I'm an analyst, and so I've actually learned that when I early tested a Fitbit or a Jawbone, my problem was I get too obsessed with the data. Like, I love the data so much that it was kind of interfering with my life. And so now I limit my data consumption to the number of steps I take each day.
I'm not squirming because I'm uncomfortable with the answers. I'm squirming because this thing keeps vibrating, so I just want you to be aware of that. At least that's a great answer.
I'm Philippe Schwartz. I'm with Withings. Before that, I did a social network actually called Uvu, which is a social network of 85 million users today around video. And I actually find the connection between social and tracking being fascinating. I think when social is getting injected into tracking stuff, that's where you really get the power of engagement, and we'll talk about this later. So I think that's combining the two experiences is actually pretty interesting. What do I do on a personal basis? I'll give you the non-digital answer first. I'm married to a Jewish wife, and that's the best way to track any kind of behavior. And when the Jewish wife is making you 4 kids, so they also help you tracking. Oh, you got a little fatter today. Something is wrong here. When did you have for dinner today? So it's the best tracking mechanism. But I think I'm kind of an average. I have my Pulse, which is a Withings product that we wear here that track steps and elevation and number of miles and how much I run and stuff like that. The scale obviously is something phenomenal. We are absolutely unbelievably amazed by the level of engagement that a traditional product like this, which has been existing since Roman times, is creating for consumers. When a consumer is buying a product, first month 30 times is going to be used, 30 measurements are going to be taken. 12 months later is 27. So it's an unbelievable level of loyalty and engagement that you see with a device like that. And again, you add the social on top of that, and friends of yours or your kids seeing that you've been losing or gaining weight, and that's actually super powerful. Which, by the way, shows a little bit the connection between the device itself and mobility and mobile application. The fact that you're able to track that information at your fingertip every time you're in the cab in New York, and so the graph looks kind of bad, looks good. I mean, that's really what's kind of enhancing that engagement that we're going to be talking about.
All right, hey, Todd Cullen here from Ogilvy. And my role is really focused on setting the data strategy for our agency. And that really means working with our clients to help them understand and see the future around different types of data, both for certainly for direct marketing, but also for new uses around inspiring creative and developing strategy and really understanding consumers. So I do have a personal interest in this area, the quantified self and wearable computing. I wear a Nike Plus watch that's tracked every run for the past X number of years. I've got a little over 3,000 miles in my app here. I'm not bragging. I'm going to make a point about this later, so remember this. And I also hire a person to walk around with a legal pad and pencil to track everything I do, just as a backup.
So let's talk about products. I mean, you're talking about products, you're talking about products. I mean, this scale, right? I mean, the fact that the drop-off is so small, I mean, it's like 1% of usage, and that's probably because people don't get on the scale for a couple of days, or maybe they're traveling or something. I mean, what's the future of these products? What's happening in this space that's so interesting? I mean, you guys are creating stuff nonstop, whether it's your baby scale, whether it's this, whether it's the blood pressure monitor, whether it's the pulse. Can you talk a little bit about products in this space?
In the future of products?
In the future, yeah.
So I think this is evolving into different directions, and you said the theme of the panel as being around wearable. So I think the more wearable it is, the more interesting it's becoming, because it's persistent, it's with you all the time. It doesn't mean, by the way, and this is kind of a fascinating fact, that because it's persistent, it goes together with the level of engagement. So we know, for instance, that trackers, activity trackers like you mentioned the Fitbit or even our tracker, the Pulse, which is, by the way, a pretty cool device. It's not this one, okay? This is the microphone. This is this one. It's a pretty cool, very tiny device. A jawbone kind of thing, and these kind of devices. The level of engagement actually dropped tremendously. So there's something very interesting into, you want to make it more persistent, but it doesn't necessarily correlate with engagement. So that's an interesting fact. So what I see as different direction moving forward, I think wearable devices are going to become more and more generic platform, and a lot has been speculated around the iWatch and some other generic platform, where I think at the end of the day, you're going to be able to track so many stuff using your phone, with a whole bunch of sensors that are just being added all the time, with the Qualcomm presentation earlier and some other stuff, or whatever is going to happen at this level, at the level of the watch level, the wristband level. So I think this is going to be evolving into a world of, the basic quantified self, I think, is going to be evolving into a world of using generic device like a phone or an iWatch kind of thing to track most of what you needs to be tracked in terms of activity, in terms of effort, in terms of distance and stuff like that. So I think that's one direction. The other direction is you're going to get more and more specialized measurement that requires some specialized devices. So if you want to analyze the sweat that you have on your skin to help you understanding level of dehydration, glucose level, huge kind of, I think, a revolution in the world of pre-diabetes kind of a diagnosis and stuff like that. Consistent or persistent blood pressure monitoring. So not the, twice a day, which is already a lot. But like the, all the time type of blood pressure. I think you're getting into all this type of measurement that are going to require some specialized type of hardware. And I think there is another trend, which is a little bit of fashion. I think to some extent having those kind of devices is also kind of the cool stuff, with some issues. Women tend to use it less faster because maybe of competition against the jewels and stuff like that. So I think there is definitely some question mark, but I think it's becoming part of that kind of a fashion statement kind of thing. So three directions I see: generic devices, specialized devices, and fashion statement.
I think fashion's got a lot to go. It's funny because I remember when I bought the first Fuel Band, I bought my wife a Fuel Band too. I was like, oh my God, I gotta get her one, and it's gonna be awesome. She looked at me, she goes, I'm not wearing that, it's ugly. And I was like, this is, right, yeah. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever in my mind. I think we still have a lot of distance to cover when it comes to fashion. I mean, even if some of these devices like Basis, like the Nike device, like the Jawbone, I mean, fashion, when we can crack fashion, and it will drive a lot more of the ubiquity of the devices. Would you agree?
Yeah, we were actually talking about this a little bit earlier. If you look at the Forrester data, one of the most interesting things is that driving interest is not just what the wearable is used for, but also where you wear it. And right now, only about 12% of US adults tell us that they're interested in wearing something on their face, like Google Glass. But there are lots of reasons for that. One is there's a lot of education that needs to go on regarding what Google Glass actually is and what it does. But the other thing I think is fashion. At the point where someone like me could get something embedded in the eyeglasses that I already choose to wear, I think you'd perhaps have a couple of percentage points greater adoption there because you can choose to look how you want to look, and I do think that is driving something for sure. I think the perception of the Fitbits and the Jawbones, I think that's coming around. I think it's driving a trend itself, a fashion trend, as well as a functionality trend, and some of that will continue. But when it comes to wearing something on your face, I think the closer to the body it gets, the harder a sell it is from a fashion perspective.
I think you're right, and we see that with some of the new hires that Apple's making from the fashion space. I think that Eve Bahar being more involved in kind of in the Jawbone device designs. So I think that emergence of the two, and as well, I mean, product design now is so critical in everything we do, and so I think the importance of how it looks and how it feels, especially as you wearable, will be much more important. But let's talk a little bit about the now, if we can crack fashion, right, and we can get people wearing the devices, both from a tracking perspective as well as getting people using it on a specialized perspective, there's going to be a lot of data, right? And there's companies today, in fact, there's TickTrack, which launched a few months ago, which allows you to aggregate all your data. And just last week, our friends at Quirky down the street announced a partnership with GE where they've got a dashboard that lets you look at data. I mean, we've got all of this data, whether it's blood pressure, weight, steps. What's the ecosystem of this? I mean, how do we create an ecosystem of data that ultimately allows us to use it more effectively, both as consumers, but as well as as providers and as well as brands? Can you talk a little about that? Do you want to?
I think there are a few categories here. If we think about the devices and the apps that we use, there's a term, a personal digital ecosystem that we might think of at least as a proxy for this. So we've got phones and watches and other devices. There are apps that support those devices, track and capture and help us analyze the data that those devices are creating and consuming. We have cloud, we have personal clouds where that data is stored in a somewhat secure method. If we think of that as sort of our a personal digital ecosystem that walks around with us as we move around, from a consumer's point of view, I think the important thing to think about is how does a brand earn the right to interact with my personal digital ecosystem? A brand can't intrude on that without some form of contextuality, as we talked about this morning, as Martin talked about this morning, and it must be relevant. There must be some utility as well. I know Melissa will talk about that as a sort of a related topic. But I think from a data point of view, from the consumer standpoint, there is some tremendous, maybe it's intrinsic value in the data that is traveling around in this ecosystem. The tools aren't there yet, I don't think, for us on the consumer side today to really properly integrate all of that data across all these platforms. All that investment has gone on the enterprise side for the past 15 years or so. It'll catch up on the consumer side. As a consumer, what I want is access to the data and some sort of personal analytics tools to help me understand what's going on and what I should do next. One of the barriers right now is I can't get all of that data in one place. My Nike Plus data is not compatible with the Withings API because of closed and open ecosystems. But really, from the consumer point of view, from the brand's point of view, again, I think it's about being relevant enough at a certain point in time in the right context to enter that ecosystem in a relevant way. And maybe it's not with offers. Maybe it's with interesting content. So TickTrack is a great example of a company that we're working with right now. With WebMD as one of their content providers. So certainly there's some utility, there's some value exchange as well, to the extent that as a consumer, I'm willing to exchange that data.
Do you see? I mean, from a data perspective, do you see us using as consumers our own data dashboards, which are then being able to, manage and control and view? I mean, all of these platforms now have APIs which we can pull the data from. So as we start to do that, do we see like this kind of whole new layer exist of kind of middleware that sits around the data?
I think there is. I'll let you jump in. I think there is some middleware layer. There's personal analytics tools that are starting to emerge. Really, the key is the data environment that an individual consumer would use to then create and use these dashboards. I think part of the issue now is all the data's not there yet, but I think those dashboards will be increasingly valuable from the consumer's point of view, to the extent that it's prescriptive, that these dashboards are prescriptive. Certainly, we can overlay sleep and nutritional data, the level of email engagement that we have throughout the day. Those are all interesting data points, and just like any enterprise thinks about today, there's big data. Big data is everywhere, right? It's really more about the right data. I think that same concept will be true from the consumer's point of view, but there's a lot of education and tools that need to be developed to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that last point that you just made about big data is not the same thing as the right data. I think that's so true from the enterprise perspective, and it's perhaps even more true from the consumer perspective. You can look at a data dashboard, like I did with my wearables, and what's useful? What can I do with this? At a certain point, it's a graph that might be cool to look at, but how much time am I going to spend managing that if I'm not getting anything from it? So I think it's about a value exchange on both sides. There's going to be a moment where people start to see their data and they go, holy crap, people know this about me? But they're also going to learn a very important distinction, which is the difference between personalization data and personally identifiable information, which is a major point of confusion in the marketplace right now. I think people think that, when there's a breach at Facebook, it's the same thing as a breach at Citibank, and it's not. And so I think there's an education piece that goes along with this. What is the data that's being collected by whom? Once I get access to that, what can I do with it? And why do I want to? Why am I not going to just hit the turn off button, right? And not let anybody ever see my data ever. So I think it's a lot of things coming together to really make this work.
And what's the role of social in there, right? Because if we are moving towards the Internet of social things, right, and everything's connected, what's the role of social in this dashboard? And do I want to share my blood pressure with everybody in this room? Do I want to share? I know. Do I want to share all of this information? Can you guys talk a little bit about social?
Maybe just stepping up for a second and I'll go back to social on this big data question that you're asking here. I think the big breakthrough of all these devices, and the thing we were making jokes earlier about, is the fact that we are finally giving to the consumer the right to own the data. Yeah. I think that the basic change here. We've been, till today, when I'm calling my doctors to get the result of my blood, well, I don't know if you can get it. Oh, you need to talk with the other guy who's going to. I mean, it's like it's my stuff. I own it. So I think number one, the ownership over the data is the consumers, the patient, the subject, however you want to call it, depending on the industry. Number one. Number two is the quantity. Going back to the big data aspect, the quantity of information which we can gather. Scale. Again, this is scales have been existing for many years. Without going too much into how many of these we sold so far, I can say that this is in the millions, if not in the millions, at least in the million of pieces of data that are being refreshed every day. I mean, this is an unbelievable reservoir of information. You do a super multi-billion clinical trial on some drugs, you hire 5,000 patients, it's a big deal. This is like millions of stuff that can be studied, correlated, analyzed. I mean, I think first of all, we're talking about a huge amount of data. And the third aspect is the personalization aspect. I think when you are going back to the dashboard question, when you're able to see in one location the fact that you have this amount, you've been gaining weight, and you have this blood pressure behave this way, maybe you did a blood test at the same time, it's all collapsing into one place. The amount of personal correlation that you can do to yourself without being a doctor, and I have doctors in my family that would kill me if they always say, but you know better than your doctor in many cases. I'm not talking about extreme situation, but you know so much. It is when I lose weight and I eat this kind of thing, you know that my blood pressure is going to go down, or my glucose is going to be high, or whatever. You're able to draw some conclusion versus the cookie cutter approach of the medical and the healthcare system, which is all about you got a little bit of high cholesterol, go lipid, and you're able to personalize basically medical attention to what is good for you. So there's a level of personalization which is used. Now, together with that comes a lot of challenges about privacy and how you share this data. No doubt in my mind that opening up the system, we cannot, as one company doing devices and application, owning everything in the space. And maybe it is what an Apple would do at some point or some other company, but I think it's, at the end of the day, it's about open APIs, as you said. And the question now is, what do you open and to who? And I think that's, to me, the biggest question. So the first layer, I think, of openness is saying, well, if my weight is going to be sent to my MyFitnessPal app and I'm able to find some nutrition plan about that, that's great. It's kind of basic. Now there is a whole open API to the world of social, which is going back to your question. And I think social is a tremendous thing. I think it's not only about I'm going to tweet my weight to everybody, I'm going to be showing everybody that I've been running 5 miles today, I'm getting ready for the marathon. It's how you organize yourself as a group to do stuff together. It's kind of a November project kind of approach. What does it mean to, hey, there's other people who want to go running in my vicinity today, going back to proximity stuff, we talk about Qualcomm. I'm at some big incubator in Boston called the Cambridge Innovation Center with a 550 startup. The amount of emails I'm getting every day from people I don't know about who wants to go for a run, we're going for a walk, we're going to go for this, and it's unbelievable. And we know that social pressure is the most important, more dominant aspect that is going to help engagement. And then you got the last layer in my mind, which is what does it mean from a brand perspective? Because at the end of the day, if I'm able to find out that this is what happened with my weight and this is what happened to my nutrition plan, the amount of targeted marketing that can be done is huge. It's activity-based marketing versus search-based marketing. I think it's huge. But now you're getting into all the privacy question, which is a huge debate.
I think the most important thing is understanding, and this is a mistake that I think marketers make every day, is that social isn't about it isn't about social media. It isn't about a social platform. It's how people are social beings. When you start to think about that question, you answer your question for yourself. So for example, we were talking about this earlier, when the Lose It app launched, the community it connected to was Facebook. And the makers of that app very quickly realized that while people want social interaction to encourage them to stay on their health plans, their weight loss plans, they didn't want to share it with Facebook. They didn't want their ex-boyfriends knowing they were on a diet. They wanted help from other people who are going through the same thing. So they created their own community. So they're still having that social aspect, but it's about the utility of the social connection. It's not just the share this on Facebook thing. So it's not about social media, it's about social behaviors of humans as people.
So looking at each data segment and what we're doing and what we have access to and figuring out the right way to embrace others.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times people say, well, we won't be a problem once millennials get older because they don't care about privacy. But sure, they might not care if they automatically share every article that they read or every purchase that they make. But ask them how they feel about their grades this semester in college getting posted to Twitter without them knowing. Probably not the same thing, So I think it's what are you trying to accomplish and who's the audience for that and how can a social interaction enhance what you're trying to accomplish?
So, we'll talk a moment about brands and CRM and loyalty and how they get involved in this ecosystem a little bit more. But privacy, privacy is a big thing. As healthcare becomes much more market-driven, and now all of a sudden, that's a place where taking and sharing this data to get better pricing is an opportunity. As insurance, when you drive, you're tracking. You can track how well you drive, which will ultimately impact. The data will impact how you're pricing for insurances. All of this stuff can either provide a lot of benefit to the end user in their life by sharing, or it can provide a lot of challenges if you speed every day when you drive on the 101 or whatever. So how do we deal with privacy of all this stuff? And especially as we're pulling it all into a dashboard, how do we protect people? How do we think about privacy?
I think it's a great discussion. I was on a panel last week at DMA where we talked about this, and I think it requires the privacy discussion as it relates to this topic really will require us all to think about privacy in almost an exact opposite view than is the prevailing view today, right? It's an FTC-driven, compliance-based notice and choice. No, not even notice and choice, but robust notice and choice for everyone. So, thus we have the pages-long T's and C's. If we flip that around, and I think we'll have to, and consumers, I think, have an opportunity to drive this, and I think we can help educate them to drive this and really make this more about Melissa's point about utility as opposed to privacy. But what that will require is a different viewpoint that puts, and we say this, we've said this for 10 years, puts the consumer at the center, and truly at the center, but really in terms of who owns, and you said this earlier, who owns the data. I think our point of view is the consumer owns the data. Advertisers, publishers, marketing technology platforms, ad tech, everyone thinks they own some piece of the data, of my data, because they've invested in tools and technologies to capture the data. Well, I think we say that's nonsense. That doesn't make any sense from a consumer's point of view, right? And to your point, it's my data. The problem is there's no way for me to control and deploy and use that data today. So the privacy discussion, I think, will become more about, are there tools that are emerging really in the VC community, and I think there's some companies in this space who are making some great strides here, that put the control of personal data back to the person who is creating the data. If we get ahead of that curve and start to think more like that, as opposed to a compliance-driven, regulatory-driven privacy debate, that really, I think, puts us all in a great position. That helps us think more about, well, what really is the value exchange? It's a value-added discussion as opposed to a risk avoidance discussion.
Almost two debates in my mind. One is, first bucket, I think, is around more like the connection of this type of devices to the healthcare system. And you're getting into HIPAA compliance and all this kind of thing, which at the end of the day is a pretty technical discussion. How to make sure that if I do send my blood pressure data once a day, once a month to my doctor, it's going to be entering my medical record in a way which is secure. And I think this is a lot of regulation and issues, but I think this is something that can be easily solved, which is a technical issue. The more important one is really the sharing, especially with the brand, which is taking us to where we are here today, where I think that this is a much bigger issue. And I think now you're getting into a marketplace about your data, basically, that you own. And what is worth for me as a consumer to share that data with a great brand in order to get what? So does it mean that the devices are being partly subsidized by the brand? Does it mean that it's a free app, like the whole example of the free apps that are, but people are already accepting the fact that they're going to be bombarded with advertising. So what the equivalent of that, in that kind of bargaining between the consumer and the brand, so to speak, would give what to who and when and at what price? I think that's kind of and I don't have all the answer. I think just a super interesting debate to have.
I think it's all about utility. Much like the last presentation, the data showed, people care about usefulness. What will you help me do? One of my favorite examples to use, I don't have kids, but those of you who do have maybe seen the Johnson's Baby Sleep app. So Johnson's Baby, they sell baby oil and baby powder and all this stuff. The app is about actually getting your baby to sleep. And yes, there are videos that you could watch, and they show the products and everything. But you can log your baby's sleep data, and it helps you analyze if there are problems, how you should change the routine, how to get the baby to sleep. Now, you are giving a lot of data to Johnson's Baby, and I'm sure that they are doing a lot of cool stuff with that data on the brand side. But from the consumer's perspective, it's helping them ensure that their baby gets a good night's sleep. That's the usefulness. They're willing to give that data because it's helping them accomplish something that they really need to accomplish. So it's about the utility.
So it's interesting because you guys, you're talking about the utility and the user in control of their data and being willing to give data to get value, right? And I think that's a very different ecosystem that we've seen lately, which is about take the data, give me a better targeted message. Really, because what we're talking about here is this ecosystem of data that enables a currency, right? A value exchange that shifts the dynamic. So in that, how do brands play there? What are the ways that they should be thinking about participating in this value exchange, engaging in this world that ensures that they know that they're adding value to your life and you're giving value to them in terms of the data? Todd?
Yeah, I think there's a, and we've touched on it a little bit already. There is an existing marketplace for data, and we know that. I've lived in that world for 10 plus years. And I think consumers are starting to realize, and I think a lot of the trigger will be going forward, these devices that we're talking about. So now I'm aware of the fact that I just weighed myself 17 minutes ago, and I'm kind of interested to see what it looks like, in another 17 minutes from now, or after I run tomorrow, or whatever it might be. And there's a marketplace for that data that goes well beyond a targeted advertisement. From the consumer's point of view, a targeted display ad, who cares, right? Well, now we all care because that's how we make money today. As we're thinking about what do we do going forward, that data, as part of a marketplace, there is a value exchange that goes beyond just the brand and the consumer, but there is this marketplace in which my data actually is worth something. And it can be valued based on who I am as a consumer. From the brand's point of view, there's some interesting things that are going on. There's a company called Personal.com that we're working with today that really is in this space, and it's an emerging company in this space, working with brands. Some of the first use cases are things like, I've got 55 fields I need to complete for a health insurance application. Well, that's a bad example. Let's say an automotive insurance application. And I have to enter that data. I have to enter some of that data for my child's school registration. I have to enter some of that other data to register my car. What if that data is all in one place and I can use it, and there's some utility there across brands? That's valuable to me as a consumer. To the extent that a brand can offer a service like that is portable to me as a consumer, that's a way a brand right now, and there's some of our clients right now are doing this today. That's a value-added service that I think are getting consumers used to the idea of sharing and using the data and seeing some value for it and associating that value with a specific brand.
Yeah, I mean, it represents a fundamental shift. I mean, it would be silly for us to be like, oh, this is easy, stop what you're doing and create utility, it's cool. When really what we're talking about is changing the way you think about approaching customers throughout the customer life cycle to move away a bit from volume-based interactions. What's an impression, what's a click, how do I quantify that, drop it into a spreadsheet, quantify the ROI, towards very premium kinds of interactions that lead to true conversion and then loyalty. I mean, like you were saying with your example of the hotel, you would never stay anywhere else if you could help it. So it's about, it might be about fewer interactions with customers, but of a much higher value to both parties.
I think it's, targeting has been used a lot. It's almost a buzzword, so we don't almost see any value in targeting anymore. I still believe that in that context, if I could be given that specific protein bar as a 24-year-old woman who want to lose weight, gain weight, whatever it is, I think there is value in that context that hasn't been achieved yet. I mean, we're bombarded on TV by TV commercials. You know the statistics better than I do. The vast majority of stuff you see on TV are on health and about diet and about food, and it's all connected to that, and it's so, it blankets the whole market with no specific value. So I think there is still a lot to be done in targeting. I also believe that one of the challenges that we have as device and application people, and we claim that we track everything, but we have that engagement and loyalty issue that we have, at least with some of the devices, is that I think we're asking ourselves the question of actionability. So I know that I need to lose weight, or I know that I don't sleep very well. You said that 30% of the population wants to track and understand better their sleep. What do you do about it? So I've been sleeping, my deep sleep has been only an hour and 22 minutes last night. What do I do with that? So I think the whole actionability is a big thing that we need as device and application people to understand better. And I think actually the brands can help us figuring it out. Because now it's like, well, if you, and again, it's branding. I mean, if you eat this versus eat that, or sleep on that mattress versus this one, if you go to the Hyatt special, whatever, best sleep floor, whatever, loyalty program, you'll be able to get a better room with special lighting for the sleep, whatever it is. This is you guys to figure out. But I think we would get a lot of value out of that. And hopefully you can get the value as marketers, because now it's like you're tracking more information, you're able to personalize and target the advertising and the offering. So I think without even getting into the utility model of like, kind of the, you give me a free scale and I give you my free data kind of thing, there is a lot of value that can be created because we need more engagement through actionability, and we as device and application guys, and I think you need more specific data to be able to better target the customer with this type of goods. So
I love that idea of actionability. I mean, that's a very powerful role for us to play. So you're in front of all of these marketers, right? Some of the top marketers in the world and some of the top agency people in the world. What's the first step? How do we start? I mean, people are tracking stuff. What do we do now?
I would argue that the first step is to take a look at what you're tracking and figure out if you're tracking good stuff you actually need to track, stuff that will give you insights into what your consumers need from you, as opposed to demographic information about your customers. That's the place that I would start.
I don't know. It's a good question. It's a dialogue that needs to happen. It's partnership we need to establish to figure it out. I think the devil is in the details. What does it mean if we find this information in terms of sleep? What the offering that can be put together with that? If we say that you need to increase this type of whatever Mediterranean diet, what does it mean? I mean, I don't think there is a generic answer. I can make one, but I don't think it would be fair. It's a very specific per brand, per application, per type of metric that has to be the beginning of a new era of collaboration, I think, between marketers, advertising people, agencies, and device and tracking people.
I want to open up to the floor. Does anybody have any questions? Carla.
I actually want to follow up with Philippe on that area, because for many, many years now, whether in the categories of food and nutrition for our clients, in the category of health and personal care, all of the clients that we deal with have been moving to this health and wellness focus, and it's very important to be authentic and to really try and help people. And at the same time, we hear all the statistics about childhood obesity, adult obesity, diabetes, all these things that are on the rise. So it would seem to me that brands would be breaking down your door to try and develop very programs like you were just talking about, and quite specifically, one for blood pressure related, one for weight related, whatever. And I guess I want to know if they are. I mean, without naming anybody, I mean, are you being approached, and are you working with big brands to try and do this?
I mean, we do have a partnership with Nestle with things on some stuff as well. So we are pushing it with them on that. But
I just wondered if it was broader than, are you getting a lot of interest? Because this really is a convergence moment where, for sure. You just described it. You have the device creators and the agencies and the brands, and
so the fact that you have even a track in an event like this means something. I mean, it's a debate that I don't think was even existing last year. Maybe because I was not with the industry. I don't think it was. There are some specific dialogue that we have, including some of them today that started a month ago with some of your clients that are real stuff. This is not just a discussion. It's real stuff that we're doing with actual integration and work and engineering and co-marketing and promotion. So I think at the end of the day, I think it's driven by one thing. It's a kind of becoming going back to blanketing the population with something generic. It was this research I was trying to run this morning and watching CNN, and this was about the whole thing about low-fat diet actually didn't do anything in terms of changing the obesity trend in the country. And one of the reasons was actually when you go to low-fat yogurt, and it's actually it's increasing the amount of sugar and glucose. At the end of the day, you're basically you're creating an potentially even bigger problem. So I think because we went from a marketing perspective, it was very wide, kind of, we were casting such a wide net. At the end of the day, we're not going to the true truth of what's happening and the needs. I think now when it's like you're going to get into, and again, that sounds a bit of a buzzword because brands love we're getting into a conversation with the customer. But I think it is a real dialogue, which is becoming, because it's such a level of private data. It's a very intimate dialogue that the brand had with that one consumer, and figuring out that this is this nutrition, this nutrient that is needed, and this type of exercise, and go to that restaurant, not that restaurant, whatever it is, I think it's, or this type of diet, I think it's a huge thing. So I think there is an opportunity to become very honest about the offering that can be brought by the brands to the consumer in a very targeted, not only targeted in the, kind of targeted banner ad kind of thing, but targeted in terms of need and of that specific person with specific issue and specific data. So I think that's a huge opportunity, and it's happening more and more, yes.
We got time for one more question.
This was fascinating. And my question actually isn't around how does a brand integrate, but it's really rare that we have someone thinking so far what we can do with these devices. And so I want to pose a question that's more of how does this integrate into our lives? So what happens the day that you don't get enough sleep for 5 days in a row and you get in a car accident and they subpoena your personal digital ecosystem and find out that maybe you shouldn't have been behind that wheel? Or, Brandon, your blood pressure keeps going up every time you're about to give a presentation, and Ogilvy decides that they don't want you on stage anymore. And then you have a lawsuit. You have a lawsuit against Ogilvy, So, but it's like, where does this? No, I'm making, obviously I'm.
I'm going home and taking a nap
I'm
after
just,
this.
I'm finding this fascinating, but then I keep going past the brands into the future, and I'm wondering, like, where does it stop? Because yes, I've blocked all the people who go on Nike runs at 6:30 in the morning and tell my Facebook page because I don't want to know about it. But at what point are we sharing so much data that we're actually putting our own personal privacy in serious jeopardy?
Sure, I'll take a whack at that one because I have made that same argument in conversations with analysts. And here's what we sort of think. There is the practical future implications, and then there are the legal ones. The legal ones will take longer to catch up to the practical ones, as usual. But I think there will be a balancing. People will save money when their doctors have better access to consistent healthcare data, which will allow them to live a healthier lifestyle, which will lower their healthcare costs. That kind of stuff will happen. You will drive more safely, your car insurance bill will go down, you will analyze your shopping patterns, you will budget better, that kind of stuff will happen. So consumers will start to offer more and more data. There will be major missteps from brands and others. The kind of scenario that you described, I mean, come on, it will happen. It will. And I think that is actually, fear of that is one of the things that's holding back some of the major brands who could be doing more of this. Because it takes a very special brand to be the one to say, we're going to figure this out, and if a lawsuit comes, we'll deal with it. It will happen, and then the chips will fall where they fall. There are a lot of very robust conversations going on about that exact thing right now in special commissions in Congress and with specialist groups, the Center for Democracy and Technology as well. Well, I agree with you, but it's interesting because they're bringing the specialist folks, the technology, the privacy people, the technologists into those conversations in a way that they hadn't previously. So I think there's actually, we're in an era where hopefully the conversations are happening on a more responsible timeline. So ideally it won't have to be something as severe as, a fatal car crash to actually push the conversation further.
I think we're already there. It's not that it's going to happen. Yes. I think we've been there, we're there, because what's been happening with social networking has kind of prepared us for that to some extent. I mean, you can say the same thing about the amount of information which is being shared on Facebook and other places, and the extreme situation that got created from kids being bullied there and suicide. I mean, there are existing people who get killed because of that. Now, it's always the question with the progress and changes and more things being shared. What are the benefit of that with the risks that come with that? And I think it's our responsibility, different players here, to make sure that we're aware of the risk and we mitigate and reduce the risk as much as possible. But I think at the end of the day, it's so much worth the fight. I mean, we're talking here about keeping people healthy because, I mean, we're talking about health keeping people healthy versus treating people who are sick. I mean, it's the amount of things that can be changed when you're not diabetic, you don't have high blood pressure yet. You're not, I mean, we're dealing with things that are so huge in their impact. So yeah, it's going to come with some risk, and I think we need to deal with them, but I wouldn't slow down the revolution because of that. I would deal with them.
Great. Well, I want to thank my wonderful panelists. I want to thank you all for participating, and this has been great. Thank you.
Thank you.
My blood pressure just went down. Yeah.
So we're going to take just a 15-minute break now because we're a little off schedule, and we'd like to come back and have Rory close out the day with a great talk. But let everybody have a bio break and get some coffee or water or whatever you'd like, and then 3:30 we'll be back here. Thank you.